Her eyes held me longer than they should have, and that was the problem. Not because it was dramatic or obvious. It wasn't. It happened in the kind of quiet way you only notice later, when your mind keeps circling back like it missed something important. I work at a small independent bookstore wedged between a tailor and a closed-down cafe. The kind of place that smells like paper, dust, and burnt coffee from the machine we never clean properly. I was restocking the lower shelves that afternoon, knees aching, when I felt it. That pause. That sense that someone had stopped walking. I looked up, expecting a customer waiting politely. Instead, I met her eyes. She didn't rush to speak. Just stood there, one hand resting on a stack of hardcovers. Coat still on even though the shop was warm. Mid-40s, maybe older. Confident in a way that didn't ask for permission. Her hair was pulled back loosely, like she'd done it without a mirror. She wore reading glasses, but wasn't reading anything. "Sorry," I said, standing up too fast. "Did you need help?" She smiled. Not wide, not inviting. Controlled. "I was just watching you try to make that shelf cooperate." I glanced back at the crooked books. "It usually wins." That earned a soft breath of a laugh. Not loud. Almost private. She asked for a novel we didn't have in stock. Out of print. I told her that. Already reaching for the computer anyway. Like maybe I could make the answer change if I tried hard enough. She watched me type, head slightly tilted, eyes steady. Not curious, attentive. When I confirmed it was unavailable, she didn't seem disappointed. Just nodded, as if she'd expected that outcome all along. "That's fine," she said. "I'll find something else." She wandered the aisles slowly. Not browsing, considering. I went back to work, but my attention kept slipping. Every time I straightened up, she was there in my peripheral vision, running her fingers along spines. Pausing, thinking. At one point she reached for a book on the top shelf and hesitated. I stepped in automatically. "Here," I said, grabbing it for her. Our hands brushed. Barely. Still, she froze. "So," she said, after a beat that stretched too long to be nothing. "You've read this." I shook my head. "Not yet." "Then how do you know it's any good?" I shrugged. "I don't. But people who like quiet endings tend to come back smiling." She studied me for a moment, like she was deciding whether that answer applied to her. Then she nodded and took the book. At the counter, she paid in cash. Exact change. When I handed her the receipt, our fingers touched again. This time neither of us pulled away immediately. It wasn't intimate. It wasn't bold. It was unedited. "What's your name?" she asked, already knowing she might not need it. I told her. She repeated it once, softly, like she was testing the sound. Then she gave me hers. Just a first name. Clean. Uncomplicated. I wrote it on the bag, even though she hadn't asked. At the door, she turned back. The bell above it stayed silent, as if even it was holding its breath. "Thank you," she said, "for not rushing." I didn't know what she meant. I still don't. But after she left, the shop felt different, too quiet, too still. And hours later, when I locked up and walked home, I realized I was still standing in that moment, wondering why her eyes had stayed on mine just long enough to feel like a question I hadn't answered yet. The second time I saw her, it wasn't an accident. She came back 3 days later, near closing. The shop looks different at that hour. Lights dimmer, aisles longer, the outside noise softened like the world's been turned down a notch. I was behind the counter, pretending to organize receipts I already knew by heart, when the door opened and the bell rang this time, sharp and unavoidable. She paused just inside, like she was checking whether she still wanted to be there. Our eyes met again. This time she looked away first. "Hi," I said too quickly. "Hi," she answered slower. Her coat was unbuttoned now. I noticed that before anything else. I noticed a lot of things before I meant to. She held up the book she'd bought last time. "I think you were right," she said. "About the ending." I waited. She didn't elaborate. "You finished it already?" I asked. "On the bus," she said. "Couldn't sleep." That explained the faint shadows under her eyes. Not dramatic, just honest. The kind you don't bother hiding when you've lived long enough to stop apologizing for being tired. She drifted toward the counter instead of the shelves this time. Leaned against it, resting her hands flat on the wood. Her fingers were tense, I noticed, like she was holding herself in place. I'm looking for something similar, she said. But not sad. Bit of a contradiction, I said. She smiled at that. Smaller than last time. Realer. I know. I came around the counter and led her to a section near the back. The heater back there rattles, always threatening to give up. She stood closer than necessary while I scanned spines, and I became intensely aware of the space between us. Or the lack of it. You don't talk much, she said suddenly. I glanced at her. I do. Just selectively. She hummed, like that made sense. That's probably wise. She picked up a book, flipped through it without really reading. Then stopped. Closed it again. I shouldn't, she said, more to herself than me. Shouldn't what? She looked up, and for a second the confidence slipped. Just a crack. Enough to see something worn underneath. Get distracted, she said. I have a lot going on. I didn't ask. I wanted to. Instead, I nodded. Yeah. Her laugh came out quietly then. Short, surprised. You're very good at not pushing. I'm better at noticing when people want space. She studied my face like she was searching for the trick. Then she stepped back, creating distance with intention. Straightened her coat. Rebuilt whatever wall she'd momentarily lowered. At the counter, she paid again in cash. Again exact. As I handed her the bag, my fingers brushed the back of her hand. She inhaled sharply, not loud, but enough that I felt it. She didn't pull away. Neither did I. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The heater rattled. The clock ticked too loud. Thank you, she said finally. Her voice was steady again, but her hand lingered just a second longer than last time. After she left, I stood there staring at the door, aware of something settling in my chest, quiet, persistent. Not excitement, not hope, just the undeniable sense that whatever this was, it wasn't accidental anymore. The third time, it was raining, not the cinematic kind, just steady and inconvenient. The kind that turns the city gray and makes everyone late for something. She showed up 10 minutes before closing, damp around the edges. Her hair had come loose from whatever careful arrangement she'd made earlier, strands clinging to her cheek. She looked older like that. Not in a bad way. In a real way. I didn't mean to stay long, she said, already apologizing for something I hadn't objected to. It's fine, I told her. I'm here anyway. That wasn't entirely true. I stayed. The power flickered once, then held. The shop felt smaller with the rain pounding against the windows, like the outside world had stepped back to give us room. She took off her coat and draped it over a chair near the counter, movements slower than usual. Careful. I had a rough day, she said, not looking at me. I waited. She didn't continue. I poured her a cup of the terrible coffee from the back. She accepted it with both hands, like it was something warm she didn't want to drop. Her fingers shook, just slightly. She noticed me noticing and stilled them. Thank you, she said. We stood there, close enough that I could smell rain and something faintly floral. She stared into the cup, not drinking. I'm not good at this, she said finally. At bookstores. I offered. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. At letting things be simple. Something in her voice made my chest tighten. I leaned back against the counter, keeping my distance on purpose. Most people aren't. She exhaled, long and tired. I come here because it's quiet. Because no one knows me. You're still you, I said. She looked up then. Really looked at me. Her eyes held mine again, longer this time, heavier. Like she was standing at the edge of something. Her phone rang. The sound cut through the room like a dropped plate. She flinched. Actually flinched. Fumbled to silence it, screen lighting up with a name I pretended not to see. Sorry, she said quickly. It's okay. She didn't call back. Slid the phone into her bag instead, jaw tight. I should go. It's still raining. I know. She took a step toward me, then stopped. Close enough that if I moved, even slightly, there'd be no pretending it was accidental. I could see the lines near her eyes, the way she pressed her lips together like she was holding words in place. Can I ask you something? She said. Yeah. Her mouth opened. Closed. She laughed softly, embarrassed. No, I can't. I wanted to tell her she could. That I was listening. That I'd been listening since the first day. Instead, I nodded. She reached for her coat. As she passed me, her arm brushed mine, full contact this time. She didn't pull away. Neither did I. The space between us tightened, electric and fragile. For a second, I thought she might turn back. Say it. Do something. She didn't. But as she opened the door, she paused, hand on the handle, and said quietly, "This is a bad idea." She didn't wait for an answer, and I didn't stop her. I just stood there, heart loud in my chest, knowing how close I'd come to crossing a line I wasn't sure I wanted to uncross. She didn't come back for a week. I told myself that was normal. People have lives, schedules, reasons. Still, every time the bell rang, my chest tightened before I could stop it. Every time it wasn't her, I felt stupid for expecting anything at all. When she finally did walk in, it was mid-afternoon. No rain, no coat, just her, standing in the doorway like she'd been there longer than a second. Like she needed the pause. I didn't say her name. She didn't say mine. She came straight to the counter and placed a book down gently, as if sound might break something. She didn't look at me at first. "I can't keep doing this," she said. I stayed quiet. Silence had become our most honest language. She inhaled, steadying herself. Her hands were flat on the wood again, but this time her fingers trembled and didn't stop. "I come here and I forget where I am, who I'm supposed to be, and then I leave and everything feels louder." I swallowed. "Then maybe you shouldn't come." She laughed under her breath. It cracked halfway through. "You think I haven't tried?" That was the first time she looked at me fully since stepping inside. There was no confidence in her eyes now, just something open and unsettled. She looked younger like that, and older, both at once. "This isn't normal," she said. "We barely know each other." "I know," I answered. "And yet," she continued, "I find myself replaying conversations that didn't even matter, watching the clock, wondering if you're here." I didn't interrupt. If I did, she might stop. She shook her head, frustrated. "I'm not supposed to feel this way. I'm past the age of confusing attention for meaning." I felt that then, the pull to step closer, to offer something solid. I didn't move. I kept my hands where she could see them. "Empty. I don't want anything from you," she said quickly, like she was correcting a misunderstanding. "I just need to understand why this feels like it does." "Maybe," I said slowly, choosing each word, "because you don't let yourself feel seen very often." Her breath caught. It was small, but it landed hard. She looked away, eyes shining, jaw clenched. "That's not fair." "I know." We stood there like that, the space between us tight with everything we weren't saying. Customers passed outside. The world continued. Inside, time stalled. Finally, she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded receipt, the one from the first day. The ink was smudged from being handled too much. "I kept this," she said, voice barely there. I don't know why. Something in my chest shifted. Not relief. Not hope. Just wait. She slid it back into her bag and stepped away from the counter, creating distance on purpose. "I need this to stop," she said, "before it becomes something I can't explain to myself." She turned to leave, then paused without looking back. "If you ever wonder why I didn't come back," she said, her voice breaking just enough to hear, "it's because I was afraid that if I did, I wouldn't be strong enough to leave again." I didn't expect to hear from her again. So when my phone buzzed late one night with a number I didn't recognize, I almost ignored it. Almost. The voicemail came through while I was brushing my teeth, foam in my mouth, my name suddenly filling the small bathroom like it belonged there. "Hi," she said. Just that. A pause. The sound of her breathing, uneven. "I know this is late. You don't have to call back. She stopped. Started again. "I found something today, and it made me think of you. I didn't want to sit with it alone." The message ended without goodbye. I listened to it twice. 3 times. Each replay stripped away something steady in me. I called back, then hung up before it rang. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at nothing, until my phone buzzed again. A photo this time. It took a second to understand what I was looking at. A younger version of her, maybe late 20s, standing barefoot on a beach. Wind in her hair, laughing at someone just out of frame. Her arm was around a man I didn't recognize, his face turned toward her like she was the only thing worth looking at. Another message followed. "He died," she wrote. "A long time ago." I didn't know what to say. Words felt clumsy in my hands. Then, "I never show anyone that picture." I typed and erased half a dozen replies before settling on the simplest truth. He looks at you like he knew you. Her response didn't come right away. When it did, it was longer. He did, she wrote. He knew me before I learned how to be careful. Before I learned how to survive things by shrinking. I lay back, phone resting on my chest, ceiling fan ticking above me. I imagined her somewhere quiet, the photo out, light low, that old version of herself staring back like an accusation. You remind me of him, she sent next. My breath caught. Not because it felt romantic. Because it didn't. It felt heavier than that. How? I asked. Another pause. Long enough that I wondered if I'd crossed something invisible. You listen without trying to fix, she finally wrote. And you don't ask me to explain myself right away. He was like that. Until he wasn't here anymore. I closed my eyes. I'm not him, I typed. My thumb hovered. But I'm here. The typing bubble appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. That's what scares me, she wrote. We didn't talk after that. No goodnight. No resolution. Just that quiet understanding settling between us, fragile and unmistakable. Later, much later, I realized my hands were shaking, not from fear, exactly. From the weight of being seen as a shadow of someone loved deeply, someone lost. And as I stared into the dark, phone still warm in my hand, one thought kept circling back, soft but relentless. Sometimes the shift isn't falling for someone. Sometimes it's realizing you've stepped into a space that was never empty to begin with. I didn't see her right away. She was sitting on the low wall outside the bookstore, shoulders slightly hunched, hands folded in her lap like she'd been there a while. It was early evening, the in-between hour when the street lights haven't decided whether they're needed yet. The shop was closed. The sign flipped. I had locked up 10 minutes earlier. You're early, I said, because it was safer than saying her name. She looked up, smiled faintly. I wasn't sure you'd come out. I always do, I said, then corrected myself. Eventually. That earned a quiet breath of a laugh. She stood slowly, like her body was heavier than usual. Tired in a way sleep doesn't fix. We didn't hug, didn't step closer right away. We just stood there, the air between us full but calm. Not charged like before. Something had settled. I listened to the voicemail again, she said. I hated how uncertain I sounded. You sounded human. She nodded. That's what I was afraid of. We started walking without deciding to. Side by side. Not touching. The street was familiar to both of us now, shared ground. She watched the pavement as she spoke. I don't think I came back because of you, she said carefully. Not just you. I know. She glanced at me, checking if I meant it. I did. I came back because I don't want to keep living like everything meaningful is already behind me, she continued. And I don't want to make you responsible for that. I wouldn't let you, I said. And I wouldn't want to be. That seemed to ease something. Her shoulders dropped a fraction. She stopped walking, so I did too. I'm not asking for anything, she said. I just needed to know if this was real, or if I was filling a silence with a person. I thought about the shop, the pauses, the restraint, the way she left when it would have been easier to stay. It's real, I said, but it doesn't have to be everything. She looked at me then, really looked. No fear this time, just consideration. Acceptance. That might be enough, she said. We sat on the low wall together, close enough that our knees almost touched. She rested her hands on her thighs, fingers curled slightly inward. I noticed the familiar tension, but it wasn't fighting itself anymore. After a while, without looking, she shifted her hand. Just an inch. It brushed mine. She didn't pull away. Neither did I. I turned my palm upward, slowly, giving her time to decide. She placed her hand in mine, not gripping, not claiming. Just resting. Warm. Steady. We sat like that as the lights came on around us, the street filling with ordinary noise. No promises. No rush. At one point she leaned her forehead against my shoulder. Light. Brief. Like punctuation. I don't know what happens next, she said. I know, I replied. And for the first time, that uncertainty didn't feel like something we needed to solve. It's strange how quiet things become after something important settles into place. When I think back on it now, there isn't a single dramatic moment I can point to and say, that's when everything changed. No confession. No promise. just a series of small decisions that added up to something honest. We didn't rush into anything. We didn't rename what we were feeling to make it easier to explain. We kept meeting, sometimes at the bookstore, sometimes walking without a destination, sometimes just sitting together while the day ended around us. The space between us stopped feeling dangerous. It became familiar. What changed in me was subtle but permanent. I stopped mistaking intensity for depth. I learned that attention isn't the same as presence, and that real connection often speaks in pauses instead of declarations. I learned that wanting someone doesn't mean needing to possess them. What changed in her was quieter still. She laughed more easily, not louder, just without checking herself afterward. She stopped apologizing for being tired, for needing time, for choosing care over certainty. Sometimes she'd catch me watching her and raise an eyebrow, amused, like she knew exactly what she was doing now. We never tried to replace what she lost. That space remained what it was, tender, remembered, respected. I wasn't a shadow anymore. I was myself, and that was enough. Love, I think, isn't always about fireworks or forever. Sometimes it's about sitting beside someone and realizing you don't feel the urge to impress, perform, or disappear. Sometimes it's choosing to stay present even when the outcome isn't guaranteed. We still don't label it much. We don't need to. What we have fits the shape of our lives as they are, not as we wish they'd been earlier. And that feels like its own kind of grace. Every now and then, I catch her looking at me the same way she did that first day, eyes holding mine just a beat longer than necessary. Only now, she doesn't look away. And neither do I. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?